Trains. Love them or hate them, they've been a part of gaming for so long that games using them as hazards to negotiate will never cease to feel exciting or thrilling for players. But even in the far-off future, the frontiers of the space Wild West aren't safe from train-induced terrors, which is where you take charge of space cowboy Maurice in Quantum Sheep's Last Train to Tranz-Central, a 2020 release for the classic ZX Spectrum. At first glance, these trains may look sleek and futuristic, but the AIs driving them are anything but. As is discovered after a routine stop where they've interfaced with incompatible hardware. Now they've gone out of control and diverted towards a number of populated planets, which is where Maurice, and by proxy you, come into the picture. To stop each rogue train, you'll need to work your way to the front of them. Only then can you engage the AI and destroy it to bring each to a stop. It's enough of a challenge in itself, but don't forget, you've got to make your way there from the back of the train. And that is no cakewalk either. Between you and the AI is 8 carriages filled with enemies, obstacles, and more. Each one has its own screen, and getting through unscathed is about learning the tricks and timing required to avoid it all as you make your way to the exit. It's a good setup for a challenge, but more importantly, it offers a fair one for you to experience. Each screen can be learned with patience, and there's no time pressure on you getting through. So even amongst the nature of Maurice's mission, you can make your way through as you please. If the inevitable goes wrong, you'll chuckle as you die and get right back on to trying again for your next attempt. Enemies start off being relatively predictable, but will get more devious with generators and even invulnerable ones making an appearance on later stages. These generators are the most devious ones indeed, as you'll need to resist hammering down on the fire button to devise the perfect timing to get through and avoid losing a life from a surprise respawn. The obstacles offer plenty of challenge as well. Sure, you'll just be negotiating ones which bounce in a predictable pattern at first, but later on, you'll find them joined by electrified walls, Exelon-esque rocket launchers, and more. What I love with the way the stages are structured is that it doesn't rely on a lot of gimmicks to keep you hooked. Rather, it takes this well-formed set of enemies and obstacles and mixes them up to create a variety of encounters. It really keeps you on your toes, and not in a way which is ridiculously hard or random. It can be learned, it can be mastered, and all up, it's pretty darn fair to the player. Which is best demonstrated as you reach the AI boss encounters at the head of each train. As you'd expect, the challenge which they bring isn't from launching swarms of bullets, nor is it from surviving multiple attack phases. Instead, it's from knowing how they move around the room, along with being able to survive to deliver enough damage to take them down. Compared with what you'll find in other games, they're certainly not the most brutal set of bosses you'll encounter, but until you recognise how they move about, they'll certainly be willing to put up a fight. And as they're defeated, the train will crawl to a stop, and you're free to move on to the next. Which is where Last Train's structure takes an interesting turn. The game consists of 2 parts, each containing 4 trains which Maurice will need to bring to a halt. Unlike many games from back in the day, you're free to choose either part independently. You don't need to beat the first half for a passcode in order to play the second. It marks another sign of fairness that can let you take a break from one part by trying the other and seeing how far you can get there. I really found this a good motivation to want to go back, simply because of how fairly the game is structured. Though it does offer these old school trappings in its mechanics and presentation, the structure and game design feels like it's rooted in more modern design thoughts and processes. Which isn't really a surprise, quite frankly, considering Quantum Sheep is involved with not just making stuff for the Spectrum, but for modern platforms as well. It's one of those things I've always felt is important, seeing creators of games for vintage systems apply more modern thinking to their designs. And we've gotten some great results out of it over the years, many of which I've covered on the channel. To bring about these learned lessons to those systems and not keep everything about the games they create rooted within the 1980s. Perhaps I'm alone with it, but if I really wanted to revisit those design tricks of yore, I'd simply just load up a game originally released then, rather than something new. So, I can appreciate that developers have their own reasons for how they approach game design. But as a player, seeing new approaches to classic genres or mechanics is something I find far more exciting. Which is absolutely what Quantum Sheep has achieved here. And so, I really have to recommend Last Train to Tranz-Central, for not only being a fun game to sit down with, but also one which offers a fair and rewarding challenge for those who are willing to get into it. One final note is about the way it's distributed. You can download the first part of the game for free from Quantum Sheep's itch.io storefront. If you dig it and want more, the second part of Maurice's train wrangling adventures is available to download for a mere £2. Should the mood strike you for the full vintage computing experience, then Bitmapsoft also offer a physical tape release to buy. Just the thing for when you want to sit back and satisfy that feeling of watching a game load in off a real cassette. Loading screeches and all. Regardless of how you choose to play it, Last Train to Tranz-Central is a fun, challenging, rewarding slice of run-and-gun action for your Spectrum. And providing you're someone who is not turned off by them, it's well worth your time to fire up your Spectrum, or preferred emulator or FPGA device, dive in, and enjoy Space Cowboy Maurice's adventures in bringing those road trains to a safe stop. And with that, it's time to sign off. But before I do, I just want to say thanks as always for taking another voyage beyond the Scanlines.